I have regular conversations with my colleagues about the witnesses that come before our committees, and it's my hope that we'll provide a robust testing of Michael Cohen's truthfulness and veracity, because he's a liar through and through.
That was Congressman Matt Gaetz responding to the widespread criticism of his tweet directed at Michael Cohen. Cohen is expected to depart from his closed-door testimony any moment now. We just saw the chair and vice chair of the Senate Intel Committee leave, so his day one is over. Joining me for part of this conversation is Bob Bauer, a former White House counsel under President Obama. Counselor Bauer, let me ask you about Matt Gaetz. I'd asked Saul Weisenberg, and he clearly was going through his head going, well, let's see here. You got speech and debate clause, you got this, you got that. He did not think there was any criminal liability that he was facing. What say you, sir?
I say he's overlooking something that Congressman Gaetz should be concerned about, and that is I think he violated the rules of the House. The House rules provide that members should not engage in conduct that reflects discredit on the institution. I think this sort of behavior, this sort of threatening behavior toward a witness who's on the eve of testimony before a House committee is something that raises serious questions under that provision. Bear in mind, members are not free under the Ethics Code to behave exactly as they wish. They have to take into consideration their institutional responsibilities. He certainly hasn't done so in this case. Now, whether anything comes of this or not, I can't say, but he certainly is not out of the woods on that front.
Would that have to be another member that would have to bring a complaint? Or is that, like, how does that work? Does that get sent to the Ethics Committee?
Another member could file a complaint. There's also an Office of Government Ethics that can receive complaints from the general public that it evaluates for then transmittal to the House Ethics Committee. The House Ethics Committee is the only official organ that can ultimately take disciplinary action. The function of the Office of Government Ethics is to make sure that it's apprised of behavior that could warrant disciplinary action.
Let me put the tweet up again, Bob, while you're finish your words there, because I think people need to see it. This is where he directly threatened Michael Cohen about his personal life, saying, does your family know about your girlfriends? Anyway, go ahead, Bob. Finish your thought.
So certainly, I can imagine somebody making the obvious point that you can't have members of Congress, in effect, putting pressure on witnesses to think closely about what they're going to say right on the eve of a lawful hearing in which they're going to be giving sworn testimony. I disagree with Saul on this question of whether it's shaming, not tampering. It's clearly something intended to get into Michael Cohen's head and to affect his ability to perform as I think we'd want him to perform truthfully before the House Oversight Committee. So I definitely think it is a fundamental ethical infraction, and the question is whether or not it'll be taken up as such.
Let me get you to put on another hat. If you were back and you were the White House counsel and you had to make a case for the national emergency that President Trump is making constitutionally, could you do it? How would you do it?
I have tremendous difficulty, largely because of what the president himself has said. The statute is widely thought to give the president unfettered discretion to declare an emergency whenever, in his judgment, he thinks one has occurred. I disagree with that reading of the statute. There has to be an existing emergency. The president then declares it. That gives him access to certain statutory authorities that he can draw on in dealing with it. The president's press conference, upon announcing that he was going to sign this national emergency, destroyed his own case. He made it very clear that it was not, in fact, an emergency. It was a political gambit. He was unhappy with the deal that he struck with Congress. In fact, he went so far as to say that he was very happy with the way his administration had performed at the border, that they'd done a magnificent job securing it, an incredible job, as he likes to say. And I don't see how any court's going to view that as consistent with there being an existing emergency that he can then lawfully declare.
What about this view that the courts, that frankly the Supreme Court just doesn't like to get involved in basically branch arguments between executive and legislative, and will just defer to the executive?
The case for deference to the executive depends entirely on how extremely the executive behaves. It's become clear over the years the court steps in when it believes that the constitutional process is at a breaking point and that only the court can, if you will, restore constitutional order. The sequence of events, including the president's own remarks at his press conference leading to this national emergency declaration, is such a travesty. It so clearly is not consistent with Congress's intent in fashioning that statute, with the express terms of this statute, that I think the president, as we saw, for example, in the travel ban cases, has provoked the courts into actions they might otherwise not be inclined to take.
My apologies for pausing our conversation a second, but our own Garrett Haake just got Mark Warner, the vice chair of the Senate Intel Committee. So, Garrett, Let me turn it over to you. What did we learn?
Chuck?
What have you learned? What did you get?
Chuck, unless you needed to dial the expectations up any higher for tomorrow, Mark Warner, having taken a break for a vote, coming back here to finish things for the Cohen hearing, stopped at the microphones and made one statement. He said when this Russia investigation started, he said that it would be the most consequential thing that he has done in the Senate. And he said that after today, there has been absolutely nothing to change his mind off that view, and he walked back into the hearing room. One of the more cryptic things I've ever heard come out of the man's mouth, to be completely
Fair
honest,
enough.
but I think it speaks to the gravity of what they have learned behind closed doors in this Senate Intel room here today.
It does. Garrett Haake, thank you for that, and thanks for bringing that. Bob Bauer, let me ask you this. I have been a bit skeptical of Democrats making Michael Cohen their first witness, basically that the first action of this House in trying to hold the president accountable is about Michael Cohen. Are you concerned about that?
No, I'm not. I think that all criticism would have come to the Democrats at whatever point they cranked up the
No, but you
investigative
get my
machinery.
point here that Cohen is, there's others to lead with. You could make an argument. He is a flawed witness at best.
He was the president's personal lawyer, business lawyer, and political associate for many years. We know from the prosecution in the Southern District of New York that he was at the center of the campaign finance prosecution in which the president figures as individual number one. Now, obviously, we'll see to what extent the hearing tomorrow devolves into some shouting circus. That would obviously be deeply unfortunate. But I think he brings such a wealth of experience with the president, and he's so central to a number of issues, including, I should mention, whatever falsehoods he communicated. In fact, falsehoods he did communicate to the Congress in relation to the president's negotiation of the Moscow hotel project. He's an indispensable witness in the investigation of the president.
Let me go back to this national emergency, and I'm curious as to this vote is likely to go. We know the result in the House. We don't quite yet know in the Senate, but if both the House and Senate, while not veto-proof majorities, but if majorities of both the House and Senate disapprove of this and they send this to the president and he vetoes it, does that matter in the legal argument that even though it wasn't veto-proof, that both the House and Senate had expressed its disapproval? Does that strengthen the legal argument against the president?
It could cut both ways. The other argument would be there is a specific process set out by statute for Congress to engage with the president in this kind of disagreement. It did exactly what the statute calls upon it to do, and therefore the court should let it go and allow the two branches essentially to have at it. But there's no question that in the background, it colors the picture, particularly with the president losing members of his own party, of a president who has clearly engaged in actions at the absolute perimeter, if well beyond what are the limits of declaring a national emergency. So I think in the background, it is not helpful to the president's case.
Bob Bauer, thank you very much. Garrett Haake with Chasing Down Mr. Warner, thanks to you as well. Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.